go with this. Okay, so good morning, Yuritsa. How are you this beautiful Monday morning after Thanksgiving?
Good morning, Rob. I'm good. It's a little cold, but
Yeah.
thank God for being inside.
Yeah, I think winter is coming. So what I'd like to do today is just, you and I met a couple of years ago. You were working for someone else. Over the last year, and right smack in the middle of COVID, you decided to launch your own title company. So I just want to talk about why you decided to do that. What is your company? What makes your company unique? And then I also just want to talk about title insurance, because I know most people that buy a house, me included, get to the closing table, and then all of a sudden there's this title insurance thing you sign or you pay for, or it gets financed. And I bet you 90% of the people have no idea what title insurance is. So start with your background, kind of where you started, where you are today, and then we'll talk about title insurance.
All right, great. All right, well, thank you for this opportunity, first of all. Love to share the story. So my background started off as a real estate paralegal. That's really where I started. That's how I got my feet wet into real estate. And I worked for attorneys for a while. So my first exposure to title insurance really came when I started working as a banking paralegal. I transitioned from like a transactional, which is like buyer seller contract sort of stuff, into the lending portion. And
Okay.
the banks care a lot about clear title. So I did a lot of working with lenders and clearing title, whatever that meant. I don't think at that time I even really understood what it meant. I just understood like what boxes needed to be checked in order to get there. And then I transitioned from working in attorney's offices to working for a title company. And there I learned a lot about the back end research. And what I noticed throughout my journey as an employee was that I'm learning a lot more, but then I'm not able to learn at the pace that I want or apply the customer service that I wanted to apply to the people that I'm engaging with. And that led to me just wanting more for myself. So I went and got licensed. And then when COVID hit, the separation between myself and the company that I was with hit really hard. I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to go. And I said, you know what? I was already involved in networking. And I already had a good little support system of people that trusted me for whatever it was. Like, okay, she's a title agent. And even if we don't know what that is, let's just trust her. And that support led to me opening Absolutely Clear Title. And slowly, my goal has always been to just educate, because of what you said. People get to the closing table or throughout the whole process, they're not told like, hey, this is an item that's actually going to protect you, and you pay for it at closing, and they give you the whole spiel of why they don't. And I wanted to change that. So I make it a mission of wanting to get in touch with people before they make their offer, if they can, or before they sign their contracts. But what I take much pride in is at that closing table, I'm making sure that I'm introducing myself as your title agent. And I'm telling you, hey, these are your papers. This is what you're paying for. This is what you're getting. And the big part of it is just educating on why people need it. Because when you don't realize that you need it until there's a problem. And when there's a claim, which is probably like less than 5% of all national title policies that get issued, it becomes a thing. So I've heard horror stories, and I believe you have one that I loved when I first met you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the way I view my business too, we're both in the insurance industry, but I view it as my job and my team's job is to educate. We can sell a bunch of policies, we can do transactions, and that's what a lot of the large direct carriers will do. And that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. They're very successful. I think what makes people like ourselves, small business owners, entrepreneurs, unique is that we need to educate. We need to really educate the client. And yes, in the title world, you can't close without title insurance, but, and I always see you say this on social media, you have a choice of who your title company is.
Yes.
Because I'll bet you a lot of people have no idea who their title company is, have no idea who they don't even know who the company is, let alone the person. Right? So they're 2 degrees of separation away from this. And then they just have this big, thick document that no one ever reads. I mean, when you close, you get this stack of documents. And I think the education side is key, because consumers have choices, right? We have choices as consumers to go out and buy whatever we want. we can shop it for price, we can shop it for coverage, we can shop it for whatever. And most people now get that information off of Google,
Yep.
which is, I was told 70% of all people that buy insurance start on Google. That's a
Wow.
big number. Now, most of them don't actually get the insurance off of the internet because they need to talk to someone. So if you can do a lot of background research, but at least in my industry, I think in most insurance industries, we try to make it as unconfusing as possible, but we make it confusing.
Because we do it every day.
Well, and that's the problem. And, it's the same thing with I was in the military and I talk in acronyms and I think I know exactly what I'm talking about, but a lot of people have no idea. I'll start throwing out acronyms and they're like, Rob, what are you talking about? So it's saying it, they say a friend of mine says, you got to dumb it down to a 5th grade education. Now that's not an insult. Some people hear that and they're like, oh, well, it's not an insult. It's just,
No.
you don't know who you're talking to. Get to the 5th grade education. If someone knows something about title insurance, you could probably come up a level.
Right.
But you start at that high level, especially at the closing table, or especially prior to buying a house, things go right over your head. I mean,
Yes.
I know we spend time, when we get clients call us, hey, I'm buying a house. Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, I back them up and say, well, where are you in the process? What are you doing? Okay, well, this is going to happen. You're going to, like, for example, you're going to pay me in full. Well, I don't want to pay you in full. Well, you need to talk to your lender. Your lender's driving this,
Not
and
my choice.
yeah. And that's why I like working with people I know, because if it's a lender I'm working with or a title company I'm working with, it's a different conversation, right? We already know each other. We can just say, okay, Rob, here's what you need to do. I'm doing it this way. You just follow me. Okay, cool. 'Cause I
Right.
trust you. Same thing with
Right.
my lenders. Some lenders, I don't know how they even stay in business, I'll be honest. But so now from the title side, what is title insurance? Let's get this down to a 5th grade level here.
Yeah.
And what is title insurance and why do I need it when I buy a house or buy any properties?
So title insurance is your security of ownership. It ultimately tells the person that's purchasing the property, whether it's for themselves or as an investment, that any events that happened in the past, from that day that they owned it, all the way, we actually go back about 60 years on a transfer of a purchase,
Wow.
that any problems, any typos, any missteps will be covered for them legally and monetarily. So that can be anything from a judgment that wasn't found, a mortgage that was never released of record, or it could be an heir. Like I've seen plenty times where you have, husband and wife own a property and they have a few children, and 2 of those children are the responsible ones. And they step up and they want to, let's take care of this house, let's do what we need to do. And then they just sort of like omit the existence of the other siblings. That can be a big problem. So that happens a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So it's things like that. It really prevents anyone from coming to your door and saying, hey, my grandmother or my aunt owned this and you shouldn't have purchased this property, or you shouldn't be the owner of it without giving me, blank amount of money or blank interest. And that's really what it is. It covers you monetarily and legally. You'll never have to step foot in a court if that does happen. And that's the purpose of it.
Okay, because I think a lot of people think that's easy, right? People think, well, of course it's free and clear. I imagine you differ in that comment. And at least today we have the ability to do searches on the internet. I'm sure there's a lot of technology that's brought to this. I mean, 50 years ago, this was going to the county clerk and pulling files, I imagine. And
yeah, there still are people that need to go to the county clerk for us, depending on the history. I mean, there's a lot of properties that the last deed of record is in the 60s. Because, somebody owned it and then the family just keeps moving in as people die and no one does anything with it. So, it becomes a problem when one person says, hey, we can actually sell this for money. Like, let's do this. And now we have to go back decades and get death certificates of people that they're like, I've never even seen that death certificate. But you'd be really in shock of the things that I find. And the great thing is that because we do live in a world of Google and internet and everything is sort of at our disposal of information, what sets agents apart and title companies apart from your regular layperson is that we know the intricacies, the laws. As a title company, title agent, we have to abide by a whole bunch of laws. We have real estate law, we have estate laws, we have tax laws. We have so many laws that we have to refer to say, okay, what's the guidelines for this? You know, is this going to be an issue? Can this be a problem for my buyer? Can this be a problem for my lender later on, if anything were to happen? So these are things that we have to sort of check off, and there's rules and legislation and, you know, statutes that we need to follow in order to get to that point of a clear title.
Yep. And what happens if that title is not clear? How does that process work?
So
If the title company, I guess I'll say the title company made a mistake or
oh yeah,
whatever.
definitely happens. So what will happen is the person that is the insured, which would be the buyer or the new homeowner, or even the lender, depending on the situation, would then start up a claim. So as agents, we are the people that do all the work, all the legwork, and our underwriter issues the policies for us. That claim is then brought to the underwriter, and the underwriter will then begin their investigation, really on us, to make sure that the agent did everything that they needed to do to prevent this claim. And then they determine whether it's a valid claim, and they'll go through the legalities of that for the owner and decide who needs to be rectified, whether it's the buyer or whether it's the person that's bringing the claim.
Okay. Yeah. And when you and I first met, I told you of my story. So I'll tell that story now, because I honestly thought that title insurance was a scam. I was like, come on. I never understood it. I bought a couple homes. So I bought a home in Montclair, New Jersey, and it was a builder who had done a fix and flip on the home. And about a year and a half after we moved in, I got a knock at the door. Some gentleman in a suit serving me, saying that there is a $75,000 lien on the house and that I need to pay it. Now, I was, of course, a little flustered. My wife was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right.
And then I looked at the document, and the lien holder was the builder, the guy that had sold us the house. And then it dawned on me, wait a minute, I have title insurance. And I was like, huh. So I got it. I went through my 600 pages and found the title policy, filed a claim, and never heard anything. It was all taken care of, because that was what title insurance was about. So the title company, I'm going to guess in this case, didn't know the lien. Now, maybe the builder hid that lien, or maybe there was some, something going on.
Or was filed sort of in between, which is what we call the gap period.
Could have been a paperwork drill. And again, but from my perspective as a consumer of title insurance, I didn't have to do anything. I literally had to call a number. I had the document. I called the number, gave him all the information. I don't remember if I sent it to him. I think he just reached out to that person that had been to my front door, and it went away. And
that was it.
The beauty of title insurance is you pay once, right at closing. So unlike the insurance I sell, where if there's a claim, the price goes up.
Correct.
That didn't happen. Like I didn't have to pay extra. I didn't have to now pay the title company extra, whatever, because they had already priced, the fact that, as you said, 5% is typically the number. But I became a believer because, and I think that's also where it's important to have a title person, agent, who can walk you through how this thing works, because that's what insurance is. Insurance is there to protect you, protect your assets. And I think with the way you're going, by just educating people and posting stuff and explaining it, you're kind of bringing it out of this black box that everyone thinks it. And that's the way I thought until I met you. I was just like, oh, you're like, you have a choice of who your title company is. And I was floored. I was like, well, really? Now I imagine most lenders have a title company as an arm, as they're lending, so they just kind of pass it. And there might be laws now based on what happened in 2008 that you can't have that cozy of a relationship, because there was a lot of money flowing both ways.
Oh yeah.
and we saw how well that worked out. And that's the same thing with my business. I can't participate in the money flowing the other way. I mean, it's illegal. I'll lose my license.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
And it's not even a gray area. It's a very much of a black and white. You cannot do this.
No.
So the lenders and the real estate agents and all those guys, they can flow money and as a licensed agent, because you have a license like I do, that the Department of Financial Services in New York frowns upon that. But
Absolutely.
that's
They
the thing is
do.
people, because I'm sure there's a pricing difference, but I think the more important part is the education. Here's what this thing does. So now you have title insurance, you have your home insurance, you have all these different insurances,
Yep,
but you should know what that means and why you're
exactly.
paying whatever it is, $3,000,
Right.
$4,000.
And
So
I said, yeah, you're right. And for me more, it's about breaking it down, like breaking down that word title, because I remember in the law office that I worked at when I first started, and small office in the Bronx, love this attorney, still very supportive of me, almost like a mentor in my transition to open my own company. And I remember sitting down at contract signings with buyers to be, and the word title would literally just be that. All right, your title is going to be blah amount
yeah,
based on, and he'll just do the calculations. All right, that's what it's going to be. But there was no breakdown. Like, what does that mean? And it means so much more than just your security that we're talking about, because it also includes other fees, other, searches and other securities, taxes. And there's so much that falls under that umbrella of the word title. So for me, because there's so much underhand going on, and the reality of it is this: attorneys are allowed to have a title company, just like they're allowed to be a notary without that extra education. It's just like, oh, you went to law school, here you go, take all this stuff,
yeah,
So,
don't get me
so a
started
lot
on
of
that one.
exactly. So because of that, there are a lot of and they do it. There are a lot of attorneys that do it out here legally. They have the proper documentation, the proper joint venture agreements, and all that stuff. But the reality is that they're getting a kickback on it. It's beneficial for them for you to use their title company, but they're
Yeah.
not giving you the customer service. They're not giving you the education. And for me, it always goes back to who's paying for the service. Who's paying for the service? Is the buyer paying for the service? Is the attorney paying? Who's paying for it? Because if you're paying for it, then you should know what you're paying for, why it is, because it's so scary. You get to a closing, people are just throwing papers at you and really talking at you because you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I'm really big on educating them before that, getting to realtors and telling them, like, do you know that, yeah, the attorney can pick it and navigate the whole thing, but you can actually help your client and reduce confusion and bring more transparency to the whole transaction just by knowing who your title agent is. So I'm really hoping that it works, because I've heard more horror stories like yours, and yet people still say, like, oh, like title insurance, like
Yeah. Well,
you know what I mean?
and I think that's on purpose. I think the people that, as you say, the attorneys who have the title, have the license, and they really haven't been trained, they just got it,
Yeah.
would prefer, I mean, that way they're double dipping. Let's call it what it is. They're charging for the closing as an attorney, and especially, in New York, you have to have an attorney. So it makes
Right.
it even cozier.
Exactly.
I closed on a house in Pennsylvania. We didn't need an attorney. So
No,
some
knows
states,
everything.
yeah, some states don't require it. The title company that we used acted as the attorney. Now,
Mhm.
there's issues with that too, obviously. I mean, this is, there's
It's a settlement agency. That's the way that they look at it.
Yeah.
But that causes more work, and that's something that I tell people that's something that I tell buyers that come to me. Sometimes I have, especially investors, that'll come to me and say, I don't want an attorney, and it's an extra expense. And I'm like, I get it. But there's a very thin line, and I'm pretty sure that you have the same exposure because you're around people, you educate yourself. There's a very thin line on what we can say that becomes legal advice.
Yeah.
And I tell people that, I said, look, I have the background. Not only was I a paralegal for years, I even went to law school for a couple of years. Like, I have a lot of knowledge in here, legality stuff, but I can't say that to you. So I'm always given like the prefix of, listen, this is like borderline legal advice. Go talk to an attorney, but I like to stay in my lane because I know what I'm good at. And I know that if I educate on this topic, I can really like start, lighting bulbs in people's minds and letting them know, like, make them, honestly, I feel like I'm giving power to people because I'm like,
Yeah. No,
you
that's a
can
good way to
do
look at
it, like you can control your transaction. I think the biggest distaste that I had for being a paralegal was being the sort of the person that was on the receiving end of those phone calls of realtors and people that wanted updates, and they just weren't treated right. You know, they would be treated like, oh, get out of here. What do you want? Yet the realtor is the one throwing all the business to you. Yet when they call you for an update, you're giving them attitude.
Yep. Well, and I like what you say too about stay in your lane. I think there's a lot of people that need that lesson. And, you know, insurance agents are one of them, lenders are another one, attorneys are another one. You know, I have people tell me what I should be doing. You know, I have a lender that will tell me I need it to be this. And I'm like, no, you know, you're protecting your mortgage. I get that. That's your job. And I respect that. It's not a negative comment. I have to protect the building. And I have to make sure there's enough liability, and I have to do so. So just because you need a number doesn't mean that that's the number I'm going to hit. I might hit it. And I've actually turned people away because they're asking me to, I mean, it's certainly unethical what they're asking me to do, but it's borderline illegal. And they're like, oh, no, can't you just do this? Then we'll close. And then you can raise it the day after closing.
I've had that before.
Yeah. And I'm like, so I just repeat it back to them. I'm like, okay, so you want me to lie so you can close, and then a day later, we're going to change everything to do it correctly. Don't you think the lender might have an issue with this? Don't you think the attorney? I mean, and I start flat out say, I will never do this. You need to find another insurance agent. And maybe that person shouldn't be buying the house if it's that tight. You know, maybe it's just not a process that we want to go down. I mean, I've seen some of the things I've seen that other agents have done is mind blowing to me. And it's just like, you know, and yes, we all have errors and omissions insurance. I get that, you know, we could all be sued, but at the end of the day, you're not helping your client. And you're certainly, if you're educating, how do you educate your client? Well, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to lie to everybody at the closing table, and then I'm going to fix it the next day. And how is that educating? I mean, that's, you know, and I've actually had clients that have asked me to do that. I explain why I will not. And they go back to their lender and say no. And I'm like, great. And you know, now you own this huge asset. And if it's not done correctly, you could lose your shirt, you know, and I joke with them like, yeah, you could sue me all you want, but you still have lost your house. So what difference does it make?
Exactly.
You know? And honestly, I try to avoid the E&O, claims, because, that means you did something wrong. And if you make a mistake, that's my view is the RE&O is if you make an honest mistake, you just forgot something, you didn't sign a document, and it's going to happen. We're all going to make mistakes. It's not that you have a process in your office that fosters unethical behavior.
Exactly.
Because then I would think you're going to get hammered. But
exactly.
Now you made a point that I didn't fully understand. You said, breaking down I guess we'll call it the premium of the title of all the different fees. What do you mean by that? Help me out with that.
All right. So the premium is what that one-time payment that you pay that covers you. So on all policies, you have a premium. So you have your owner's premium, that's for you as the owner, that covers you. And then you have your lenders if you're borrowing money. Then under that are endorsements that most is the lender that requires them. So a lot of it is coverages to say, like, if there are any environmental problems and it results in the property having to be like demolished, let's say, and the lender needs their mortgage paid, that covers them. It also, there's like a waiver of arbitration. There's like little things that are coverages for if there ever was a risk of a claim. I mean, if there ever was a claim that were to come to be. Then under all of that is all of your searches. So title agents run like bankruptcy searches to make sure no one is in bankruptcy and can possibly make a claim to the property. Patriot searches, which shows whether they're on the most wanted list for terrorism. And then we break down things like taxes or municipal searches, which are searches done through the municipality. So your certificate of occupancy to tell you your valid occupancy. You can have your housing and building, which tells you whether there are any violations on the actual structure or the foundation. And then you have like your recording charges. So you're buying the home, you have to pay to record the deed on the property
Mhm.
of record. You have to pay for the mortgage to be recorded. You also pay for any outstanding taxes that are due within the next 60 days. If you're borrowing, you pay mortgage tax on whatever you're borrowing, which is a huge portion of your
Yep.
title bill. People don't, they don't tell you that, you know, they'll say, oh yeah, you're gonna pay, they put that under closing cost, but they don't realize that the title company is the one that collects it. So
I didn't realize either. So you collect PMI.
no. See, PMI is private mortgage insurance that the lenders charge you if you're borrowing more than 80% of the value of your home. The bank
Okay.
takes that. That's your PMI that you pay towards your mortgage every month to the lender.
Okay.
Now, when you borrow money and so in the Hudson Valley, it's about 1% of your purchase price. So whenever you borrow money, you have to pay the state 1% of taxes. You have to pay taxes on
Okay.
everything.
Okay.
So that 1% gets collected by the title company. And when we submit the document to be recorded with the county, they take that 1%.
Okay. So you have an escrow account basically,
Yes.
and you collect that money up front. So it's,
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. And now are you, as a title agent, are you licensed to do stuff outside of New York, or are you just in New York right now?
Just New York.
Just New York. Okay.
Yeah, that's goals eventually.
I'm sorry?
I said goals eventually will be to get national and
is that similar to the way PNC works, where you just get a license in another state and then the New York State one reciprocates to it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but it's different in like different states. So if I were to say get licensed in like Pennsylvania, like where it's all title, I may need a little bit more like coverages, because then I'll be working as a settlement agent instead of just an agent for title insurance, because then I'm handling a lot more funds, a lot more escrows, things like that.
Okay. In your professional opinion, when is the right time in the home buying process to talk to you?
I would say when you've made your offer.
Okay.
When you've made your offer, and you, even before you get accepted an offer, you know, I would say form your team. I'm really big on shouting that to people. You know, you've decided, okay, I want to buy a house. Who do I need? You know, and make your list. You know, I may need a realtor, maybe you don't. You know, I need an attorney. I need a title agent. All of these, the title agent definitely comes before the homeowner's insurance.
Yep.
You know, so, and I think that's where the confusion comes. I have received a lot of calls of people who are at the stage where they need you, and they'll call me and say, oh, hey, like I need title. I'm like, no, you probably already have title. You know?
What you need is a homeowner's policy at this point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So definitely, or even if you've already made the offer, but now you know that you're going to go sign contracts, that's a good time to contact me. Because what I offer to people that are going to buy a home is the comfort of the A to Z's, because I was a paralegal and I know, you know, how does it start? What do I need? Who do I need? And all the way to the closing table. So I can comfortably answer questions about the process. Much, you know, I won't say that I'm a realtor, definitely not a realtor, but my experience as a paralegal definitely allows me to give people a little bit more comfort on the process and letting them know like, okay, this is what you need. This is how it's going to flow, or this is what's coming up next in the process. And I like to form that relationship with them so that when they go to sit with their attorney, they're like, oh, I have a title person. And I've had attorneys say, no, you cannot use this person, which is illegal, but.
Slightly, but yeah, I can see the strong arming. Well, and it's funny how you say that, because I'm at the tail end, right? I joke, I'm the last 3%, right? You're right there at the finish line. The problem is, if that's the time I'm meeting the realtor or the lender, that's not the right time.
Right.
I need to be further up in the process. And I also work with clients that are in flood zones, high-risk flood zones. So you really want to meet me well before you even put an offer in, because the problem is about 3 weeks prior to closing, they'll determine the flood zone. And then I come flying back with a $7,000 policy and I blow everything up. And that's not what I want to do, but I'd rather blow it up at the beginning than,
oh, wow.
you know, then wait until the end, because and it doesn't matter what I think the flood zone is. What matters is our company
The
called
lender.
CoreLogic that does it. But,
Right.
that's
Huh.
the same thing with you. It's like, a lot of times in your business, it's just a non-event. It's just, you find out at closing, here's your title, sign it. And you saw it in the HUD-1, whatever the amount is that you're going to pay,
Right.
or they throw it under closing costs that you're going to finance. And let's be honest, when you're buying a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 home, that $3,000 or $4,000 in closing costs, it doesn't, and you're financing it anyways. So
Right.
what's
It
the
doesn't
point?
stand out.
Doesn't stand out. But at the end of the day, when you look and, I saw a big difference between New York and PA about the closing costs, but you might be spending $15,000 on closing costs, and then you're financing that. The amount of interest you're paying on that is phenomenal. Go look at a 30-year amortization chart. It'll terrify you how much interest you pay. So why not at least have someone educate you, so maybe you can get, a better policy, better pricing, better whatever but at least, as you said, down the road, if something happens, you can reach out. Like in my example, it would have been great to have someone like yourself to say, to call you and say, hey, listen, here's what just happened.
Yeah, for real.
Where do I go with this? And you're like, oh, I'll take care of it, send it over, and it's done. Now, fortunately, I was able to call the title company. They did a great job because I wasn't even involved. But I can imagine that's not the normal, because title company, like you said, 5% is, kind of the ratio. It doesn't happen very often. So when it does, it's probably
Less than
just this
5.
huge fire drill trying to figure it out. And you need to have like you said, you've done all the searches. So you also want to know how did we miss this?
Oh yeah.
And if it's a seller, now you're pushing it at them. If you missed it, you might get subrogated against. I don't know quite how that process would work, but if it's typically it's probably the seller hiding stuff.
It's really sort of, and I say this because even in like the continuing education stuff that I follow up on and the classes that I take for my license, it almost everything says the sellers initiate title, sellers pay for title, which is really what it should be. I feel like New York is so ass backwards when it comes to this, because as a title agent, when I have issues that come up in title, it's the seller that has to clear everything. It's the seller's responsibility.
I didn't think about that. So the buyer initiating it, which is really what's happening, that's right. Backwards.
It is.
Yeah.
But
and me as a seller want to make sure it's clear so I can sell this house, right?
Exactly.
I have a vested interest in this.
Exactly. So it would make sense. It would make sense the other way around. Like if the seller prepared everything, initiated it, cleared everything, and then the buyer pays for everything, that makes sense, because they're the ones ultimately getting the security. But it's just very weird to me. So, but that's something that, I feel like, let me change one portion of the industry first before I start attacking the other part, because it doesn't make sense. But and it becomes very standoffish with sellers, like, oh, I'm selling as is, I don't know anything, I don't have documents. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm sorry, you have a mortgage or like a lien from 12 years ago that I need you to give me proof that you paid it. You'd be surprised. But which is why I'm very big on it. So when people approach me and say, how can I get you involved? Much like your question, I'll say, just put me on an email, put everyone that you want on your team, put us all on an email and say like, hey, this is everyone, keep everyone in the loop. There was a file recently that I played like the paralegal because there was so miscommunication between everyone, so there's definitely a value to knowing the ins and outs. But the biggest thing is, if you want to get a clear title, you can't do it without miscommunication. With miscommunication, you can't do it with a poor team. You have to have, especially in New York, just as well as I do, there's so many people involved. Yeah. So many people in the pot. And then those people have people, it just becomes.
Well, the other thing I found too, and I do the same thing. When a lender approaches me or a client approaches me, I'm like, introduce me to your lender.
Yes.
And especially with real estate investors, like fix and flips and landlords, because their lender will determine what my policy will need in it. Most are consistent. Like most, I can get 90% of it, but I honestly tell my clients flat out, I'm like, listen, I need your lender to tell me what they need, because otherwise I'm going to do a bait and switch on you. I'm going to quote it the way I think
Yeah,
it should be done. They're going to
right.
come back and say 2 days prior to closing, we need this, this, and this. Insurance never goes down in
And that's gonna
price.
go shoot.
And now you're a
Exactly.
captive audience. And the same thing applies to you, right? If all of a sudden someone says, hey, my title, that looks expensive, you're already heading to closing. They're not going to stop closing to bring you in. So I tell them the same way. I'm like, introduce me via email. I will
It's
get the
so true.
information I need, because I'm sorry, you, Mr. or Mrs. Consumer, don't understand what I need. And I even have said to some people, it's like being a marriage counselor to two people that hate each other, right? The poor consumer is stuck in the middle. I'm asking a question, they translate to the lender comes back to them, they come to me, and it's wrong. And
Ah,
and I'm like, listen, you have enough to do. Let me handle
yes,
the insurance. It's a small piece. Let
exactly.
me handle this. So I know about 2 weeks prior to closing, I have a quote. I will get it approved by the lender. And lenders are like, that's not a binder. I'm like, you're right, it's a quote. You approve it and do it in email. So that way, when you tell me a week from now it doesn't work, I have an email to come back to you and say, hey, listen,
Yeah,
I
you
gave you
said
a
yeah.
shot. And
Yep.
the lenders, I think, like it. And I think you're right. I love what you say about a team, because that way everyone's in the loop. I mean, I've worked with some attorneys that you and I both know in the
Mhm.
real estate world, and they're spectacular. They are proactive. They are asking questions. They're like, Rob, I need you to get this, this, and this done, and I need it
Yep.
done by tomorrow. And they're the quarterback. A lot of these closings, there's no quarterback.
Very true.
It's like a bunch of 5 or 6 people running around trying to figure this out. And the poor consumer is like, what's going on? I mean, like I had an email today. I'm like, the guy was like, hey, I need the binder. And my client responded to the email with, dude, basically he said, hey, dude, you've had this binder for over a week now. Why are you asking Rob for this binder again? Because I
You
had
gotta love it.
introduced myself, I had done the emails correctly. And, I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I
Yeah.
mean, it's all set. I have an email. I track all this. All my emails are tracked. All my calls are recorded, for obvious reasons. And,
Hmm.
it's like, don't make this more difficult than it should be. It is a difficult process at best, but let's get the right people in the room. And like I said, and now you're on an email. If something about title pops up, or, hey, we're waiting for the municipals or whatever, the client can say, Yuritsa, what is that?
Yeah.
What are you waiting for? Oh, we're waiting for the municipality to come back with their report, or we're waiting
Oh,
for
yeah. And
whatever.
we're really scapegoats also,
Oh,
when it comes,
100%. Oh,
when there's delays left and right. It's like,
yeah.
it's title, It's like,
Oh, I hear it all the time. Oh, I hear it. And then what I love is when I get thrown under the bus and they're like, well, we're now waiting on the insurance. And I'm like, dude, I told you this 2 weeks ago. I need this information. I'm not going to do just a random quote to keep you happy. I want to do this
right,
correct. So my client, who's going to be pension, because at the end of the day, I mean, what happens in a real estate transaction? You're part of it, attorney, a lender. At the end of the day, I end up with that client. You
right,
guys have done your
right,
job. You guys move
right,
on to the next
right.
client.
Move
I
exactly.
I don't, right?
Right.
They're now
You're
a
with
client
them.
for at least a year, hopefully longer than a year, but they become a client of mine. So I have to do
Absolutely.
things differently. I mean, you
Yes.
do things differently, but a lot of lenders, it's a transaction, and that's great. I mean, especially in today's market, they just want to get to the next one.
Yeah.
But I have this client. At the end of the day, I get left with a mess that I
Right.
have to fix. And because someone didn't do their job, or I didn't get it's like, even when my clients are going to pay at closing, like I try to avoid that, because I've had attorneys send me a check. First of all, they send it made out to me, which is wrong. So I can't cash that check. I can't pay
No.
for that. It's like, no, it clearly said Travelers. It clearly said someone else. And I
Right.
get it 60 days after closing, and the policy is already canceled.
Oh,
Now, legally, here's the problem. Legally, the consumer's on the hook for that.
right.
So
Now
if
they
that
have like
policy
left.
cancels and there's a claim, they can't go after the lender. They can't come after me. Now I'm going to see it canceling, and we're going to be reaching out, and we're going to say, hey, and we just had a client, they literally had to pay their homeowner policy, even though it's escrowed, because the lender just didn't do their job. So now this poor client, who's actually a friend of mine, now has to go through this whole nightmare process of readjusting the escrow balances, right? So now he's paid, and you know that, I see you shaking your head like, yeah, I know exactly. But now you've got this escrow mess takes a couple months to clean up.
Yeah,
And all they had to do, and they're like, oh, well, send us the invoice. I'm like, you got the invoice 60 days ago, but we never got it. Well,
that's
I don't know what to
crazy.
tell you. I mean, so I try to tell people, we're not doing it at closing. You're going to pay me in full. So I know it's paid. I know we're good. Then you go to closing, and you're going to pay it either way. You're going to pay me
Yeah, of
$1,000
course.
either way. So why not just pay me? But a lot of them don't even know that. They're like, I have to pay more money. I'm like, yeah, and I was telling them, I know you're paying a lot of money right now. And since you're so close to closing, I mean, some people want to just pay me through their checking account, but now the lender's watching their checking account, the lender's
Absolutely.
watching
Yeah.
their credit cards. So I'm like, okay, use your credit card and we'll be transparent about it. The lender's going to know you have to do this. I mean, they're going to
Yes,
see the charge and go, oh, $1,000, that's to rob.
that's what that is.
I
Yeah,
said, but just be really careful. Let's not start playing that game. But
exactly.
how would someone reach out to you? What's some good contact? What's a good way to find you?
I think the best way to find me is really my email is really the best way, which is my first name, Yuritsa at A Clear Title. You can also find me at acleartitle.com, which is my website, which I
Okay.
hope to build a little bit more in 2022, but you can sort of send me a message right through there. Facebook, Instagram, my handles are at A Clear Title on Facebook and at Absolute Clear Title on Instagram.
Okay.
So yeah, text me. I have all of my information up on my social media pages, my webpage. My 845 number is great to call or text me. I'm responsive. I love texts because it's just quick, just I'll
Yep.
respond to you.
Yep.
So yeah, that's really the best way to find me. And or in BNI, if
There you
anybody
go.
wants to come visit.
No.
I had to throw in a plug because we're in the visitor zone right now.
Oh, okay. No, but I think people should reach out to someone like yourself sooner rather than later. Even if you're just starting the home buying process, just to understand what you do, how you do it. So when
Yeah.
they get to that closing table or they're that 10 days out, 2 weeks out, they're not shocked. They see this title expense on the HUD-1 and actually know what that means.
Right.
And they
And they
can
know
ask
who I am.
Well,
And they know who I
yeah,
am when I show up. They're like,
yeah.
who's this person taking my money?
Yeah, well, and yeah, and you're right, because again, I've done closings in other states where, all of a sudden there's this person I've never met. I'm writing them a check for $4,000 or $5,000. And I'm told I have to close, I need it. I can't close without it.
Yep.
But I'm like, I don't even know this person. I
What is this
always thought, my view has changed, but it was just, this scam that someone was running but people think my insurance is a scam too. So I guess I have to appreciate that a little bit more. But, well, Yuritsa, thank you so much. And we'll definitely do this again because I think it's important. But let me
Thank you, Rob.
stop everything here now.